Sex, drugs, mayhem, and rock and roll.
People getting killed, that was a normal thing.
The Godfathers who wrote the rules.
It's a simple thing. You're gonna get burned.
The Beach Boys, Guns N' Roses, and the Madman.
We've made Charles Manson a star.
Ronnie Spector's longest fight.
He may as well have put a bullet to my head.
The rock star who was tricked out of his band.
They went past the rock bottom right through the crevice of hell.
I'm Gene Simmons, and this is the secret history of rock and roll.
Hey, you got the sex, you got the drugs, and you got the rock and roll.
Throughout its history, rock and roll has flaunted an outlaw image, from Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis all the way to Eminem. But you might not realize that beyond the pose, behind the hit records, true criminality has ruled and shaped the soundtrack of our lives. It's a world full of dirty deals and shadowy figures. Even the most notorious mass murderer can have a special place in the secret history of rock and roll.
Well, when I first came to California, as it happened, I was backstage with Jim Morrison at the Fillmore. And one of the first things Jim said to me as he was pumping my flesh was, "It's cool up here, man, but L.A. is really where the devil is at."
Like many rock stars, Eric Burdon of the Animals came to Los Angeles for 1967's Summer of Love, with no idea that true evil was about to change the music scene forever.
Charles Manson ended up in the LA music scene. He wanted to become a rock star. And in the late 60s, to be a rock star was the best kind of power you could have.
David Dalton was on the scene as a writer for Rolling Stone magazine, and he was close friends with a man who'd become Manson's unlikely mentor in the rock and roll business, a Beach Boy.
Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys picked up two of the Manson girls hitchhiking, and they took him to the Spahn Ranch where Manson had his headquarters. And of course Manson immediately saw in Dennis Wilson somebody who could really get him into the music scene.
Dennis Wilson eventually invited Manson and his girls to move into his house on Sunset Boulevard.
Dennis was a true wild child, and we'd get a little drunk and stoned or whatever, and he would say things like, "Charlie is really cosmic, man, you know." Well, you know, he listens to Beatles records and he gets messages from them. He played Helter Skelter and Piggies, and he tried to explain what Charlie saw in these tracks.
Dennis Wilson must have heard something in Charles Manson's music, because he convinced the other Beach Boys to record one of his house guest songs.
Dennis Wilson bought one of Manson's songs called "Cease to Exist," and it was recorded on the Beach Boys 2020 album. Cease to exist.
Yes, there's an actual Charles Manson composition on a Beach Boys album, but you wouldn't know it because Dennis Wilson took credit for the song himself.
And he changed the title of the song to "Never Learn Not to Love." And when Manson saw that Dennis had changed the title of the song, he got very upset.
But Dennis Wilson's biggest mistake was introducing Manson to his friend Terry Melcher. Terry Melcher produced records for groups like the Byrds and Paul Revere and the Raiders. He was also the son of Doris Day.
Terry recorded Charlie singing his songs, and he promised him a record contract, which eventually he reneged on. And, you know, Charlie, of course, was, you know, enraged at this.
What followed was one of history's most infamous crimes. In August 1969, Charles Manson sent his followers on a mission to murder. 5 people were slain at the home of director Roman Polanski and his bride, Sharon Tate. Polanski was in Europe at the time. His wife, 8 months pregnant, was among those killed. The couple had moved into the house only weeks earlier. Its previous occupant was Terry Melcher.
Charlie Manson felt ripped off by the music industry in L.A., and I believe that's the reason that Charlie Manson chose to go to that house.
Charles Manson and his followers were convicted and sent to prison. But in the years to follow, there would be a strange reversal of fortune. Dennis Wilson drowned, a drug addict and alcoholic. And from behind prison walls, Charles Manson became something of a celebrity. In the words of Spin magazine editor Alan Light, something of a rock star.
There's always been a certain amount of fascination with Charles Manson as this, maybe sort of cool underground figure.
Someone's got to be insane. Someone's got to be the bad guy.
In a way, Charles Manson had that sort of rock star vibe to him.
In 70s punk and 80s heavy metal, Manson was a symbol of evil. By the early 90s, he was just another pop figure. Kids even wore Manson t-shirts, following the example of rock star Axl Rose, singer of the top-selling band Guns N' Roses.
I think Axl in particular saw as this sort of punk rock gesture just to try to piss everybody off.
But no one expected this would lead to the top of the charts.
In 1993, Guns N' Roses recorded a Charlie Manson song called Look at Your Game Girl. Look at your game girl.
The song, composed by Charles Manson, appeared as a so-called hidden track on the top 10 Guns N' Roses album, The Spaghetti Incident. The song wasn't even listed on the cover, but royalties were still owed to the writer.
He got the publishing rights on a song on a multi-platinum album.
In maximum security prison, convicted killer Charles Manson stood to collect hundreds of thousands of dollars in songwriting royalties. There was immediate public outrage and protest led by Sharon Tate's sister, Patty.
From what I've heard some young people speak about, they think that Charles Manson is this really cool, weird guy. And this is what Axl Rose has allowed to happen.
Ricky Rocket of Poison saw the method behind the apparent madness.
I thought it was a brilliant move, personally.
Why?
Because they wanted reaction and they got it,
But more surprisingly, amid the uproar, an attorney saw a chance to find justice.
23 years ago, I filed a lawsuit on behalf of the young man sitting to my left. And we were able to obtain a judgment of $500,000 for this young man for the loss of his father.
Back in 1970, attorney Nathaniel Friedman had won a wrongful death suit against Charles Manson on behalf of Bartek Frykowski, whose father was murdered along with Sharon Tate. No one ever expected to collect.
With thanks to Geffen Records, they have indicated cooperation that they're going to pay any royalties arising from that song to Bartek Frykowski.
Because of the judge's ruling in 1970, Guns N' Roses record label diverted Charles Manson's royalties to the survivor of one of his victims.
It seems the American justice system has its own way of working things out. And I'm grateful for that.
Axl Rose and his bandmates gave their portion to a Save the Dolphins Foundation. As the secret history continues, Ronnie Spector discovers her rock and roll marriage took away her rock and roll royalties.
And every time I'd go to a movie, I'd hear one of my songs. And then it started to bother me.
This portion of Core TV is brought to you by Lubriderm Skin Renewal with PHA for radiant, younger-looking skin without irritation.
For every rock and roll success story, there are hundreds of others who've lost money from rip-offs or mismanagement. Take Richard Berry. He sold his song Louie Louie for $125. The leader of Badfinger was so depressed over missing royalties, he hanged himself. But few have fought back as long and as hard as Ronnie Spector, who'd been denied royalties and rights through marriage. When she first hit the charts in 1963, she was Ronnie Bennett of Spanish Harlem, lead singer of the Ronettes, rock and roll's ultimate girl group.
That's all I ever wanted to do was sing rock and roll. I want to sing, and I want to sing rock and roll, and I want to do it the rest of my life. And I did. I followed my dream.
Ronnie really was the archetypal first rock and roll chick. Madonna has said that she always wanted to sound like Ronnie Spector looked.
But pop journalist and author Jerry Hershey says the Ronettes' legacy was always tied to their producer, the eccentric Phil Spector. Spector was legendary for his so-called wall of sound, a thunderous musical backdrop that piled on dozens of instruments. With Ronnie's voice, he created classics like Walkin' in the Rain and Be My Baby.
I think that Be My Baby is the perfect rock record.
Bow, bow, bow. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe 2.5 minutes long, operatic in scope, and Ronnie told me she actually listened to the song being written and being written about her.
On the surface, Ronnie and Phil were the perfect rock and roll couple. In fact, in 1968, they married. But soon, the honeymoon was over.
As soon as he married Ronnie, as soon as he truly had her, he withdrew her from the public. And it wasn't so much love as imprisonment.
It was a strange and frustrating 4 years for Ronnie Spector. Her husband rarely let her leave their Beverly Hills mansion. When he did, it was with bodyguards. But why?
I don't think we'll ever know. I don't think Ronnie knows quite how and why it went so bad so quickly.
Well, he may as well have put a bullet to my head. You see those things on Mysteries and Scandals where people are just sitting in their car and lumped over. I felt dead, too. I'm not a singer anymore. I'm washed up. See, this is all in my head.
By 1972, Ronnie realized she needed to get control of her life, and that meant breaking away.
For Ronnie to break away was almost as difficult and monumental as Tina getting away from Ike Turner because Phil was such a control freak.
Actually, my mom helped me. See, we had the plan because you couldn't walk away from Phil. You know, you couldn't get out of that mansion. And so my mother and I took a walk, and he said, okay, because he figured I'm with my mother, I don't have on any shoes. When we got around the bend from the estate, we started jogging. And that's the only way that I could have gotten out, is to leave my clothing, my pocketbook, everything.
Ronnie Spector returned to New York City 10 years after she'd left it. And over the next several years, she found that many fans and friends were anxious to work with her.
I was working with Bruce Springsteen in the E Street Band. I was working with Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes.
Billy Joel wrote and recorded a song for her and about her, Say Goodbye to Hollywood.
Ronnie Spector looked forward. She couldn't depend on the past because she wasn't getting any money from her old hits.
Financially, I didn't get any royalties. As a matter of fact, in '66, we only got one royalty check for the three of us. It was like $14,000. Then we didn't get anything after that. I didn't care about money as long as we had, and this was the three of us, as long as we had Aquanet for hairspray and makeup money and clothes money.
Apparently enraged that his princess had left him, Phil Spector didn't make things easy. He forced Ronnie into divorce court again and again. The legal tactics and cross-country trips cost her time and money, while unexpectedly, Ronette's songs started generating money for Phil.
People that would approach me, like Springsteen or Southside, they would say, well, aren't you getting money for all these records? You're in movies and means. And I would say no. I never even thought that I was supposed to receive money.
By the early 1980s, it was more than a few films. Ronette's music from the 60s was bringing in millions.
The Ronette sound recordings over time became amongst the most valuable that were being licensed